The sun hasn't even cleared the ridge yet, and you're already on your knees in the dirt. Your fingers are cracked. There's a woman next to you pulling weeds from a plot of einkorn wheat that took 3 generations to domesticate, and somewhere behind you, a toddler is crying because there's less food to go around than there was last year, when your grandparents just walked into the forest and came back with everything they needed. You're shorter than your ancestors. You're sicker than your ancestors. Your teeth are worse. Your bones show more stress fractures. And yet, tomorrow morning, you'll wake up and do this exact same backbreaking, monotonous task again, because somehow, some way, you can't go back. That's the part almost nobody tells you about the agricultural revolution. We were taught it as a triumph: humans got smart, humans figured out seeds, humans built civilization. Roll credits. But when archaeologists actually dig into the skeletons, the pottery, the settlement patterns, they find something closer to a trap than a triumph. So today we're asking the question underneath the question, not just why did humans start farming, but why did they keep farming when the early evidence suggests it made their lives measurably worse? And what does that tell us about the kind of decisions we still make today, the ones that trade long-term freedom for short-term security, one small, reasonable-seeming step at a time? Here's the thesis, stated plainly: farming wasn't a single brilliant invention that humans eagerly adopted because it was obviously better. It was a slow, uneven, often reluctant transition, driven by a mix of population pressure, climate shifts, and a psychological trap we still fall into constantly, the trap of incremental commitment, where each individual choice seems rational, but the cumulative path leads somewhere none of us would have chosen if we could see the whole road at once. Understanding this isn't just archaeology trivia. It's a mirror. Because the same mechanism that locked our ancestors into 10,000 years of agricultural labor is still operating in your career, your relationships, your spending habits, quietly, right now. Let's start with the evidence that farming was not, initially, an upgrade. Skeletal remains from early agricultural sites in the Levant and later across Europe show a consistent pattern: shorter stature, more dental disease, more signs of nutritional deficiency, more repetitive stress injuries in the joints. Bioarchaeologist studies comparing pre-agricultural foragers to early farmers, including work synthesized by researchers like Jared Diamond and later refined by scholars in paleopathology, found that the shift to cereal-heavy diets narrowed nutritional diversity dramatically. A hunter-gatherer might eat 200 different plant and animal species across a season. An early farmer might depend on 2 or 3 crops for the majority of their calories. One bad harvest wasn't an inconvenience. It was catastrophe. So why on earth would anyone choose this? The honest answer is that almost nobody chose it in one dramatic moment. It crept up on them. Picture a small band of foragers in the Fertile Crescent around 11,000 years ago. They already knew where the wild wheat grew best. They'd return to those patches year after year, maybe pulling a few weeds without even thinking of it as agriculture, just as basic patch maintenance, the same instinct that makes you tidy a garden you didn't plant. Over generations, that light touch management became slightly more intensive. Scatter some extra seed here. Clear a few more weeds there. Each step was barely a step at all, a marginal increase in effort for a marginal increase in yield. Nobody woke up one morning and declared, "From this day forward, we abandon the old ways." Instead, they woke up thousands of mornings, each one slightly more committed than the last, until the accumulated momentum made reversal almost unthinkable. This is where population pressure enters the picture, and it's a piece a lot of the popular narrative leaves out. Foraging societies weren't static Edens of leisure, contrary to the romanticized version some corners of the internet love to circulate. As populations grew, even slightly, the surrounding land could support fewer people per square mile using purely wild resources. Anthropologist Mark Cohen argued decades ago that this population resource squeeze, not sudden inspiration, is what really pushed groups toward intensified food production. Farming produces more calories per acre than foraging, even if those calories are lower in quality and diversity. So when a region's population crept past what the land could comfortably sustain through gathering alone, farming wasn't chosen because it was better, it was adopted because it was the only lever left to pull. It's the difference between wanting more and needing to feed one more mouth than the forest can support this year. Climate plays its own role here too, and it's a genuinely elegant piece of the puzzle. The end of the last ice age brought a period called the Younger Dryas, a sudden, sharp cold snap that hit right as some groups in the Near East had started experimenting with wild grain cultivation. When conditions worsened, the wild stands of grain that people had come to rely on became less reliable. Rather than abandoning cultivation, many groups appear to have doubled down on it, planting more deliberately to compensate for the wild supply's unpredictability. It's a strikingly human response, isn't it? When something you depend on becomes unreliable, the instinct isn't always to walk away. Sometimes it's to grip tighter, to control what you can, even if that control comes at a steep personal cost. And once a community had committed real labor to a plot of land, clearing it, tending it, defending it, walking away stopped being a neutral option. This is the fourth piece, and maybe the most psychologically revealing one, the sunk cost dynamic baked into agriculture from its very origins. A forager can relocate with almost nothing lost. A farmer has invested months of labor into soil that's now theirs, emotionally and practically, even if legal ownership as we'd recognize it didn't exist yet. Leaving means abandoning that investment. Staying means doubling down, planting again next season, expanding the plot, maybe domesticating an animal to supplement the harvest. Every choice that follows is shaped by the choices already made. Sound familiar? It's the same mechanism that keeps a person in a job they've outgrown because they've already put in 5 years, or in a relationship that stopped serving them because of everything already built together. The past choice doesn't just inform the present decision. It cages it. Now, does this mean early humans were simply victims, tricked into misery by forces beyond their control? Not exactly, and this is where the nuance matters. Farming also enabled things foraging simply couldn't: permanent settlements, larger social networks, the eventual surplus that allowed for specialists, potters, priests, soldiers, and yes, eventually storytellers like the ones making this very video. Some researchers push back hard against the agriculture was a mistake framing, pointing out that population growth itself, driven partly by farming's higher caloric yield per acre, may have made a return to foraging genuinely impossible for many groups, not merely psychologically difficult but demographically non-viable. There simply wasn't enough wild land left to feed everyone the old way. So it's not purely a story of a trap sprung on unwitting victims. It's a story of a door that quietly locked itself while people believed they still had every option in the world. So here's the picture coming into focus. It wasn't one decision. It was thousands of small, locally sensible decisions, each responding to a real pressure: a few more mouths to feed, a colder season, a bad wild harvest, land already cleared and not worth abandoning, that together built something none of those individual people would have signed up for in advance: a lifestyle of harder physical labor, worse health, and dramatically reduced mobility, in exchange for stability and, eventually, the raw numbers that let their descendants outcompete every forager population around them. The trade wasn't good versus bad. It was short-term flexibility versus long-term inertia, and inertia won, one wheat stalk at a time. And that's really the insight worth carrying with you past the archaeology. We like to imagine that major life shifts happen through big, deliberate choices, a switch flipped, a decision made with full information and clear eyes. But most of the significant transformations in a human life, then and now, happen the way farming happened, incrementally, reasonably, one small commitment compounding into the next, until you look up one day and realize the path behind you has effectively closed. The debt that seemed manageable at $18,000 becomes unmanageable at $80,000. The habit that seemed harmless the first dozen times becomes the thing that defines your evenings. None of those single steps felt like a trap in the moment. That's exactly what makes the pattern dangerous, and exactly what makes it worth recognizing early, in your own life, before the 10,000th wheat stalk locks you in. If there's a single takeaway from 11,000 years of dirt under our fingernails, it's this: pay attention not to the big decisions you're consciously making, but to the small ones you're not. The real architecture of a life, or a civilization, gets built in the accumulation of moves too minor to seem worth questioning.